Today, we are excited to be joined by Dr. Laurie Marbas. Dr. Marbas is a board-certified family medicine and lifestyle medicine physician, a wife, a mom of 3 grown children, and a runner. She utilized a whole foods, plant-based diet with her patients for years in rural Colorado, and then as the former medical director for Dr. Furman's Health Oasis in Boca Raton, Florida. Now she currently practices via telemedicine for doctors on demand and has worked with several mastering diabetes clients. Dr. Marbas is the managing editor of the first medical journal focused on plant-based nutrition called the International Journal for Disease Reversal and Prevention. It's an open access journal that anyone can access. Learn more at ijdrp.org, and we'll have a link below as well. She is the host of the Healthy Human Revolution podcast, which also has a website that has online self-guided classes for individuals who want to transition to a whole foods, plant-based diet, and many resources for parents who want to help their kids eat healthier too. You can learn more at healthyhumanrevolution.com. Her team at Healthy Human Revolution are experts not only in a whole foods, plant-based diet, but motivation and habit formation. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Marbas.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here again.
We have so much great stuff to talk about today. So let's start with how you got into lifestyle medicine and what it's been like practicing that.
Well, I kind of fell on me. Is that the best way to describe it? And I was very blessed to have that happen. I was in rural Colorado. I had just gotten out of the Air Force, where I served as a family medicine physician. And we wanted to be in the beautiful state of Colorado. But when you get to the western side of Colorado, I lived in a little town, or I worked in a little town called Rifle, Colorado. So you can imagine the type of individuals that I had. So there's people who are hunting, and there's a lot of restaurants, but they're steakhouses and those type of things. So of course we had our fair share of diabetes and hypertension and people having heart attacks and strokes. But I was just practicing the medicine that I was taught. We go by guidelines, we give drugs, and you come back, you do tests, you give more drugs. It's kind of the way it is. But I had a patient one day who came in and said, "Dr. Marbas, meat and dairy upset my stomach." I said, "Well, stop eating meat and dairy," knowing she'd be okay, but not clicking in my head that, wait, that's a plant-based diet. Like I didn't know about that. That was like 7 years ago. And she came back in 30 days and her daughter went on the diet with her. Now in this little town, there's no places to go and, buy food like in a restaurant. So they had to go cook their own food. And so they were eating whole foods, not processed foods. And when she came back, she brought her daughter with her, who was 16 at the time. And she said, "Dr. Marbas, I brought my daughter with me because something happened to her while she was eating this." She goes, "She quit 2 attention deficit disorder medications. Why? She feels amazing now, and I want to know why." I was like, "I don't know, but that's really cool." I was like, "How did you do that?" I was like, "What were you eating?" She goes, "I didn't eat meat or dairy." I was like, "I know, but what were you eating?" And it was like a slow dimmer switch coming on in my brain, because apparently I'm kind of thick-skulled sometimes, but it was just like, I was eating fruits and vegetables and beans and whole grains and nuts and seeds, and like, "Oh, you were eating plants." She goes, "Well, yeah." I was like, wait a minute. So I started, we started doing research, and I Googled, the first thing I Googled was the China study by Dr. T. Colin Campbell. And I read that book in 2 days, no kidding. And I'm reading going, wait a minute, you can reverse and prevent cancer by what you're eating, by animal protein and casein. I was like blowing my mind because I didn't understand the power of food and nutrition. And I started really digging in, and I found Dr. Greger's website and Dr. John McDougall and his resources for physicians. And I was looking for that information, like, well, surely there's somewhere for me to learn about this if this has been around all these years. There really wasn't at that time. And so I started piecing things together, and I had one more patient come in, and within that same around 2 weeks, and she had lupus. And we put her on a plant-based diet because she wasn't doing very well. Migraine, she was on 12 meds, 50 pounds overweight. She was on methotrexate, high doses of prednisone. And she was willing to try a plant-based diet. I said, "I don't know much, but I do know this." I said, "It might help your inflammation and your pain." Within 2 weeks, her CRP, which we had measured prior to her leaving the first day, was 3 times high normal. And in 14 days, it was just outside normal. So dramatic drop and improvement, in her symptoms. She lost 8 pounds Within 5 months, she had lost 50 pounds, came off 7 to 12 meds, including her lupus meds, eventually went lupus antibody negative. But during that 2-week period, when she came back, I was like, that's it. You were doing amazing. Her migraines were better. It's like, I'm going home and I'm switching. So I literally went home and took the whole family. I threw down my purse as I walked in the door on a Friday night, and I cleaned out the refrigerator, everything that had animal origin, had a face or came from a face. And so we're going on a plant-based diet. My 3 teenagers are like, okay. And then my husband's like, you're still cooking, right? And I was like, yeah. He goes, all right. I'm like, thank goodness that was easy. But I had a quarter of a grass-fed beef. You're doing the right thing by grass-fed in my freezer in my garage. And 2 days later, the freezer broke, all the meat ruined, and had to be disposed of. And there has been no turning back. Like, there's just phenomenal fun. So I started looking into how can I approach this and do this with my patients. So it was a really long year. The first year was a lot of patience, I should say, because they worked with me. Because the first time I was like saying eat a plant-based diet, I didn't specify certain things, like don't just focus on fruits and vegetables, because then they were going to come back tired and they were fatigued and they didn't feel well. They were eating enough calories. I was like, oh, well, we got to make sure you do enough, beans and starchy vegetables and do some other things. And I was learning all of these things. And then I understood the social impact. And then, like, people just can't go home and say they're going to a plant-based diet like I did. Some people struggle with food addiction. And I learned so much from my patient, and I'm still learning. But that was the beginning of the evolution of lifestyle medicine. I didn't even know about lifestyle. I never heard of lifestyle medicine. And then I found the American College of Lifestyle Medicine a few years later. I took their first board certification last year and did fine and passed that. And just joined the Plant Nutrition Project and, tried to meet everybody that I could. Started the podcast a couple of years ago, and just really trying to learn as much as I can by delving into the science and then applying it to the patients. And whatever obstacle they have, I was like, well, let's figure it out, because there's always an answer. So that's how it all started.
Yeah, I really love your story because you have so much hands-on practical experience working with just a wealth of patients for many, many years now. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. But can you tell us a little bit about Doctors on Demand, what that is, how that works? Give us some information.
Absolutely. So I've been working and been blessed to work on Doctor on Demand for about 14 months. And it came out of when our clinic closed in Florida. I was like, well, it's my first time without a job. And a friend of mine had recommended you should do telemedicine. I was like, that'll be different. And I wasn't quite sure how to approach it. So even me coming into it as a physician who was always used to hands-on to my patients was like, how am I going to do this? And it's turned into an amazing experience. So I can see patients. I have 13 states that I'm licensed in. All of those patients can call, and it's a face-to-face interface. So they're on their cell phone most of the time. They can be on an iPad. They can be on a computer. They can actually be international. I've had patients call from Africa, Italy, France, Greenland, Ethiopia. Where else? Oh, somewhere in the Middle East. And these were Americans who were traveling abroad who wanted to just touch base with an American physician when they were looking at if someone was sick. But anybody could call us. I mean, even if you're an international person, we can't practice medicine that way, but we can certainly give advice. So that's interesting. As long as you have some type of source of an internet, you can call us. And so we have our own, it's a HIPAA compliant interface. Like, there's a video to video, just like you and I are speaking via web conferencing. That's basically the same idea. Like, if you were going to Skype someone or FaceTime someone, I'm seeing you. And I'm visual contact is huge, but also the audio. I can order medications. I can order labs. I see your past history. I can see your labs. You can make appointments and follow up with me. And that has just been fun. And then I started getting my first Mastering Diabetes patients. And I was like, well, this is cool, because they're already warm to the idea. I'm not convincing some stranger that called for a UTI that, oh, by the way, you should do some plant-based eating for that diabetes that you have too. And you have been really blessing, because there's been some real challenging patients, but at the same time, again, learning opportunities for myself. How do I help patients really hone in on those skills. So these are people who are already, maybe they're doing a plant-based diet, but they're struggling with maybe hypertension. They have some other factors that are making their diabetes more complicated. So that's where I can step in and really help those things. So they have access to so much. And not only that, if I need a specialist, doing the other job that I do with the journal, I have plant-based specialists from almost every specialist you can imagine, literally a phone call away. Which I have utilized more than once. So it's been really fun to be in that position.
Yeah, we at Mastering Diabetes are huge fans of this platform, and being able to send our members to you has really just been a great gift. And it's very affordable as well. So,
Yeah.
People go on the platform, oftentimes insurance will cover it, but if insurance doesn't cover it, it costs $75 to have a 15-minute conversation with you.
Mm-hmm.
And they fill out paperwork beforehand. They fill it out on their computer.
Right.
So you already know a lot before you start the meeting. And it's just really efficient and effective to get a doctor like you, so much experience, who understands the program that we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. And you, like you said, you have access to all these other experts in the plant-based world that can help answer questions. It's just an amazing opportunity. So why don't you just list the 13 states that you're covered in?
Sure. So let's start from the West Coast to East. So I'm in Washington State. So Washington State, California, we got Texas, Colorado, Arkansas, and we move forward Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, Virginia, and Kentucky.
That's brilliant. You probably didn't know I was going to put you on the spot like that, but you nailed it. That's great.
I was like, yeah, I think I got them all.
Okay, so let's say somebody, for whatever reason, they can't access you. They don't live in one of those states, or they don't have a doctor who's supportive. What type of tips can you provide for working with a normal physician?
First of all, I would go to plantbaseddocs.com, or is it plantbaseddocs.org? I don't recall exactly the website, but there's a list of physicians who have put themselves out there saying, hey, we are plant-based physicians, and see if there's someone in your area. That's how I would first start. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I would, first of all, when you approach to a physician, you may get the feeling that they may not be friendly to a plant-based message, especially if they've been telling you to eat a higher protein diet, or a keto diet, or some type of more animal-based heavy protein, cut the carbs because you're a diabetic diet. If that's the case, what you may want to do is say, I'm just going to be eating a healthier diet, and I may need your help in scaling down my insulin or scaling down my medications, because I really plan on getting healthy. And you just, by saying, I'm going to be eating more plant healthy foods and less processed foods, and leave it at that. They don't need to necessarily know all the specifics. If you're comfortable with that. If you're still a little struggling with not sure how to say that, they certainly can reach out. We do have some things that you can do on healthyhumanrevolution.com. You can contact us. We have a free course all about a plant-based diet. We also have a subscription course where they can join us, and we have access to me weekly, which is helpful. I don't do prescribed meds or anything, but I can certainly answer those more specific questions, like my doctor said this or this or that, and that would be fine. I'd be happy to help out. But really, it's a matter of just changing your message and how you're doing it, because you do need someone monitoring your blood sugars, your high blood pressure meds. Those are the two big ones, and you don't want to be trying to do that by yourself, because that can be a big deal. And
I love that tip of not having to give too much information. I mean, I've been following this lifestyle for just about 12 years now. And as a type 1 diabetic, I go to the doctor every 3 to 6 months, and I get my checkup and medications, and none of my doctors over all these years know exactly what I eat. I just tell them I'm eating healthy and I'm in good shape. My A1Cs have been good. So I've never had to ask a bunch of questions and figure out what I'm doing, but you don't need to give them more information in a lot of cases, as long as you have support in other areas.
But what frustrates me about even what you just said is, why don't they see you? Because you must stand out. Right? Because you're not like all their other patients. Why aren't they going, well, why are you better? And these others are like, what are you doing? That's what I would be asking.
It's so true. It's so true. They're just not that curious. And there's just so, I guess, limited time with doctors these days as well.
It doesn't matter, at least to me. I think you should be always do the right thing. But
if only we had more doctors like you. That's the goal.
It's frustrating. All right.
Yeah. Okay. So You have a lot of experience and knowledge around the psychological challenges in this lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people, they have, fears of just, I can't stop eating meat. I can't stop eating dairy, or if I'm never going to eat cheese again. And then also maintaining the program. So if you can give some tips around that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because there are people who always say they can't, right? For example, I can't stop smoking or I can't stop this. It's like you said, it's a choice. Everything's a choice. And if anyone, if other people can do it, that means that you can do it too. I would say, why don't you want to? Is it a matter of fear of being different from your family? Are you afraid of social situations? Are you afraid that the food won't taste good? I think that's just being ignorant and hiding behind the wall. So I think you have to have a really honest conversation with yourself. Well, why don't I want to do this? And that's really important because then you got to get down to the crux of it. Do you want to be healthy or do you want to remain ill? And so that's where I usually draw people's attention is like, there's two futures that you can choose. There's a future with your optimal health with less or no medications. And then there's a future that will continue down the path that you've been. So if you're a healthy person already, well, then let's maintain that because as I'm pushing 50, I'm like, wow, I really need to make sure I got all my ducks in a row because 50 will not be as kind as 40 as it was 30. So, I can't imagine a world that I'm not as healthy as I am now because I feel like I ran a 5K with my 3 kids in their 20s and my husband over a holiday, and it's no problem. But I imagine, if I had diabetes or hypertension or had a heart attack in my 30s, like my real dad did, that would be a different story. So it was a choice I made because I saw the evidence like, well, I want that. So that's how I see it. You have to ask yourself, well, what future do you want? And sometimes it's hard for us to connect our actions today with our future. And that's where you just have to start thinking about, you have to make that future real. So I always like to have people write a future self, like write down what is the one thing if you could do it, if you didn't have, achy knees, or if you didn't have an extra 100 pounds carrying around, what would you do? And then say, well, why can't I do that? And if you find the obstacles, look at the obstacles. Well, it's because of the cost. Well, let's talk about the real cost. Do you think this is more expensive? Absolutely not. So, my bill went down $400 a month when we switched over, and I had 2 growing teenage boys in the house. I'm like, you will feed some teenage boys. Let me tell you, I was thankful. And so those are the things that we have to look at is the why. Connect to why would you even consider this? Because you want to live the healthiest, longest life you can. And I know as I hit middle age, I'm seeing the last half of my life a little differently than I did 20, 25 years ago. I was like, oh, 40, that's far away. Huh, well, that flew by. So now it's like, well, what's coming up next? And my kids, they're all plant-based. The reason they see it is because they've seen the evidence of other people. So they see their friends who are getting type 2 diabetes, in their 20s. They're seeing their, friends, family members, their parents having heart attacks at 40. These are all real cases from my own children's parents' stories. They're having diabetes, they're overweight, they're having cancer. There's all these things that don't have to be. Then they see their mom and dad. We're a different family. And that is the really important thing, is that you just understand what are you missing out on in your future. And then we can talk about food addiction and, well, what is it that those few minutes or a few seconds of taste has such a hold on you versus all the many things that the rest of your day doesn't entail. Is that food so important that it's more important than your future? That's really important, that conversation you have to have with yourself.
Yeah, I love how you have people write that down and really, let it sink in and think it through.
Right.
You brought up the cost. This is a very hot topic. I'd love to have you share some more. People are concerned. They go, fruits and vegetables are expensive. I'm going to have to go to Whole Foods. It's going to, I can't afford this. So what tips can you provide for that?
All right. So when I was doing this, remember I was in Rifle, Colorado. I had a Walmart and we had it's like a Publix or a City Market or a Fred Meyer type store. That was it. And where I lived, I had to drive 20 miles to get there. Okay. So if I could eat this way and save $400 a month, you don't have to go to Whole Foods. There's one Whole Foods on the entire west side of Colorado. It was 2.5 hours away. Did I go there very often? Maybe twice a year. And so those are the things that are really frustrating, because people just see, really expensive things like avocados. They're like $1.50 each or whatever. So let's think about it. If you buy canned beans, yes, those may be a little more expensive, but they're still cheaper than meat and dairy. If you buy dried beans, those are like what, $1.50 a couple pounds or something. You get rice, you get potatoes, you buy seasonal local produce, that is going to be super cheap. So the bulk of your foods are very cheap. Now, when you go and you start adding the layers of processing, like if I go buy veggie burgers that are pre-made, one of them, they're not as healthy because these have a lot of additives. Those are going to be more expensive than making my own veggie burgers, making several of them, freezing them, and putting them in my freezer. So there's many things to look at. It is not more expensive to eat this way. This is called a peasant's diet for a reason, because these are the foods that peasants can't afford. You can grow your own food. There's so many things. You can go to farmers markets at the end of the day and look around and say, hey, you don't want to take all this back, do you? Can I get this at a reasonable discounted price? You can freeze food. You can buy food that's on sale and then freeze the rest of it. There's so many things you can do. Batch cooking. The other thing is that people are thinking, oh, well, when I go out to eat, well, yeah, if you go out to eat, it's always more expensive than cooking at home. And I think a lot of people they're afraid to cook. We haven't learned how to cook. But guess what? Again, this is an investment. Either pay me now with time and preparation and cooking healthy foods, or you pay me later with illness. So it's cheaper. It takes a little bit more time, set up, get going. But once you do, it makes the payoff is so different. But it is not more expensive. I did an experiment in Florida, and I ate this way by myself for less than $50 a week. And the reason I chose $50 a week was because that's how much the food stamps are per month on a one individual adult. And if you can do that in Florida, and I was in Boca Raton, talk about one of the most expensive places to be, anybody can do this. It's just, you got to do a little bit of research.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and batch cooking, like you said, I mean, that's a huge one. And like you said, buying the dry beans. I mean, there's just all these little tips. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you have going on at Healthy Human Revolution? I know you guys have courses on some topics like this.
Yeah, we have a whole lot. So this was born out of my desire to make this available at any time to anyone at anywhere. And so that's where the online is so powerful. I can connect with people in, Australia or Canada or the UK or anywhere in the world. And what we wanted to do was not only discuss just the basics of whole food plant-based, addressing the science, what is the science behind plant foods and why are they better for you, but also the habit formation, the mental roadblocks. So I've been partnering with Anthony Masiello, who lost 160 pounds. He's been doing this for about almost 12 years. And then Jason Cohen, who lost 120 pounds. And Jason's been doing it for, I think, for about 7 or 8 years himself. And he just ran a 100-mile Leadville race up in the mountains. He ran 100 miles in 29 hours. Okay, so if you can't think plants can't feel you, you're wrong. So these individuals have amazing experience just in and of themselves. But Anthony's also a health coach, and then Jason is a photographer, professional photographer, videographer. And so he's being able to help us create media that's engaging and fun. And then we are also, creating all sorts of stuff. Like we have 57 tips on how to get your kids to eat vegetables down. It's free. But we also have a kids cookbook with superheroes. I have 8 superheroes like Karate Kale. We have Tammy Tomato. We have Rock the Rock Broccoli, Anna Banana. So these are really fun. It's a coloring book along with a cookbook. And then also with that, we have a kids course where parents can go on and log on. And it talks to you about every age and stage, what supplements they need, what type of foods they need, how to get engaged with children, how to save money. We have also Healthy Revolution, how to eat this on a budget. We have the plant-based holiday guide. So we have all of these things that are available. Many of them are free. We do on our Facebook page, we do lives every week, answering questions. So we're trying to build as many resources as we can. We're also building our own journal to help people even more in depth, building those healthy habits that will hopefully be coming out in the spring. So there's just a lot of really cool stuff that we're wanting to do.
That's terrific. We're going to make sure there's a link, below this video so everybody can find
Cool.
these resources.
Thanks.
One thing you talked about earlier was that, you can save money by eating at home and not eating out. But sometimes people, they don't have an option. They have to eat out, whether it's business or travel. How can people stick with this lifestyle while eating at restaurants?
That's a really good one. I also have a restaurant survival guide, by the way, that's for free on the website. I'll tell you, I went to Africa, rural Africa, for 2 weeks, and I stayed on a whole food plant-based diet. So if I can do it in rural Africa where there's no electricity or running water, anybody can do this. So one, basically, when you look at where you're going, so first of all, if you're going to a place that you don't have a choice, then I would say, well, let's look at the menu. Think about eating before you go if you're going to have very limited options. That's just preparing yourself so you're not hungry and tempted or frustrated because you're hungry and then you become hangry, and then that's an issue. But if you have a choice of where you're going, look at the menu beforehand. And not only that, but you want to look at not only the sides, but also look at, what is served with the meat dishes. Maybe they have that steamed broccoli or that sweet potato that's not offered as a side, but it's offered with some other options. Look at the salads. Can you bring your own salad dressing? I have patients who do that all the time. Like, they make their own salad dressing, and then they go and order a salad. Let's say it says, let's say if you go to Panera and there's a chicken salad. So I say, hold the chicken, but add more other things. Maybe add more fruits or more veggies, or so a little slice of avocado, and then bring your own salad dressing that way. But when you look at a restaurant, if you're worried about price, I would probably go to a buffet. If you're worried about going to a fancy restaurant, they're going to be willing to fix things for you. I went to a steakhouse in Chicago that literally had knives of customers' names on it that they ate the largest steak. I had the best fresh broccoli and vegetables, and what else did I have? I think I had, they had a sweet potato for me. I mean, it was so much food. They were so excited. Oh, and it had some sauteed mushrooms, and it was delicious. That was the best thing I ever had at a steakhouse, eating plants. So don't be afraid to look at the menu and be creative with the items. Like, oh, look, there's some brown rice. I can order that with my sweet potato and the side salad, and I'm good to go. It's just a matter of preparing. Look online. The menus are online. They're very simple. Go to maybe some more of the traditional ethnic restaurants, like Ethiopian has a lot of options for plant-based eating. Indian foods. The problem is a lot of these foods, when you do go out, do have a lot of added oils, which of course we're trying to avoid, and added salt. Sometimes you can't avoid that. That is a choice you have to make, whether you eat beforehand or go to eat out, or some people I know pack their food. I went to a conference and someone brought their Instapot. It's more than I would be willing to do, but some people are so like, I gotta eat only this. That's fine. I'm okay with a little added oil if I do it once in a while. It's not such a big deal, but most of the time we don't eat out either.
Yeah, and I think there's a big distinction between somebody who is struggling with a medical condition versus somebody like you who, look, there isn't any particular issue at the time. So
right.
It makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if I have someone who's hypertensive and they're eating a very salty meal, that's a big deal. The other thing is you can ask them. So let's say they see that there's a grilled veggies on a menu. Say, can you steam these for me? And, can you give me some non-salt seasonings? Don't be afraid to ask. Some people are very conscious about, they don't want to be trouble. Now listen, these people want your money. They could care less how they get it. They just want it. So if they're good customer service, if they give you heck, then you just don't go back. But the majority of restaurants I've been to, I've never had a problem asking certain things. And if anything, it engages them in conversation. And I usually end up trying to convert them to eat a plant-based diet.
That's amazing. I love that. Okay. Can you talk to us about this medical journal that you're working on?
Yes. Oh boy, that's a passion project. So I was approached by Dr. Scott Stoll of the Plantation Project. You guys should check it out, theplantationproject.org, if you aren't aware of it. It's really amazing, especially if you're a healthcare practitioner. But they have a free download too about the plant-based diet, and a kid's guide too, which is free. They downloaded it, so you should definitely check it out. Dr. Stoll and Mr. Dan Purgis had contacted me about helping start the journal a year ago. It'll be a year ago in December. And none of us had any experience about launching a journal. But we really felt it was time that we had a place that we could, think of ourselves as a repository for plant-based research. So if you look at it now, we have all of our folks scattered, right? So you have some nutritional journal over here, or some cardiology journal over here, or some other very difficult to access journals. That's the other thing. So most of the research, if it's not funded by a pharmaceutical company or a particular industry, what you'll see is public monies. The interesting thing is that when you have research and it's funding a research study and your tax dollars are paying for it, many times you or your physician or someone who may benefit from that information does not have access to it because it's behind a paywall. I would say the commercial publishers, it's a $10 billion estimated a year industry. With your money, for researchers who are doing the research for free, they're doing the reviews for free, and then you still end up having to pay for it. So what we wanted to do was turn that model upside down. So it's open access, meaning that anyone can subscribe and have access to the articles that we'll be publishing. In addition to that, typically when you have an open access journal, you're like, well, who's going to pay for the publishing? Well, that's a good point. Usually you charge the author some type of fee to actually publish their own works in that type of model. We didn't want to do that either, because we didn't want to be there any reason that someone wouldn't have access to this. This is life-saving information. So we felt compelled to take on the burden of finding funding. So we have people who are, feel free to donate. So again, this is a not-for-profit organization. And we launched after we looked at commercial publishers, and they all told us no, because we couldn't make money with this in our desires. So we're self-publishing with a group in Canada who are helping us out of Simon Fraser University, which is amazing. But there's still publication costs. But we launched it after 9 months, so literally building it from scratch, the policies, getting the reviewers. We have over 70 peer reviewers. Cyrus is one of them. And, all of these amazing people who are behind us, Dr. Joel Furman, we have Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Greger, Dr. McDougall, we have Dr. Bernard. We even have a previous Surgeon General, Dr. Richard Carmona, who's joined us. We have the Dr. David Jenkins, who actually, he created the glycemic index, and he promotes a plant-based diet. I guarantee you, other doctors who say they always talk about the glycemic index, they have no idea that the guy who actually invented it purchased a plant-based diet. I was like, you're kidding me. We have all these incredible resources and supporters and just phenomenal information. And our editor-in-chief is Dr. Kim Williams, who was a past president of the American College of Cardiology. How fun is that I get to talk to him on a weekly basis? Yeah. So this is going to be well run. We've already had submissions. Our first publication was just some kind of introductory edition in September, just like, hey, we're here. But in March, end of March, will be our first edition. In addition to that, we will be publishing a companion journal for the general public. So that's going to be called basically it's Disease Reversal and Prevention Digest. Kind of like those old preventions. I don't know, maybe speaking to a younger audience, but back in the day, they had those little paper journals. But we're going to make this a lot of fun. And we're going to take the information that we publish in the journal, actually translate it to a language that's usable for the general public. And we really want to be on top of, any type of research that's coming out that can be considered confusing. So, you hear about the butter is back. And so we want to address those type of things. So all of that information as we grow, and we'll hopefully be able to congregate into this journal and get indexed on PubMed. And it's a process, but we've been moving along. We have so many people interested in working with us and partnering with us. It's been quite a ride in the last 11 months.
This journal is a very, very big deal, and I see a very bright future. So congratulations to you and the whole team putting it together. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. So there was a very small team, but we got it going, and now our team is growing, which is really fun. And I've never thought that I would have such an opportunity, but it really is true blessing.
Now, you brought up Dr. Jenkins and the glycemic index. So I think we got to touch on that, being this is a diabetes event. So why don't you just talk about the glycemic index in general and how you factor that into working with your patients?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the glycemic index is basically a food rating system, right? So it tells you if you eat a certain food, how it will raise your blood sugars is basically it. So when you may hear that people, for example, if I have diabetic patients in my old practice, back in the days before plant-based nutrition, I would send them to a registered dietitian, and they would say, you need to eat low glycemic foods. So foods that don't bump your blood sugars. So that means you need to eat more fat, and you need to eat more animal protein and less of this, those fruits that might raise your blood sugar and those type of things. That is how it's utilized. For me, now looking at understanding the actual on a cellular level, what's causing the type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance in a type 1 diabetic, which is a big deal that's not is neglected, by the way, I think, and with physicians, because they just keep adding more insulin. They never sit down and think about, why is this patient requiring more insulin if they're type 1? They just don't do it. Anyway, that's a side note. But with my patients now, when I explain the underlying mechanism of insulin resistance, and we're working on removing those high fat foods and eating a low fat, high fiber diet, no animal protein, with just getting your protein from the plants. In the beginning, if I have someone who's highly insulin resistant, I may say, let's focus a little bit on those lower glycemic index foods. But what ended up happening is that we're able to move up the scale pretty quickly. For example, I'm working with one patient now as a type 1. Within a month or 2 months, her blood sugars went from the 400s down into under 175 regularly as a type 1. And now she's eating bananas and she's eating potatoes and things that would be like sacrilegious to other physicians and registered dietitians. It's a really interesting tool to use to manipulate blood sugars, but it's not utilized correctly because they're just focusing on, I always say it's the smoke, right? So your blood sugars are the smoke, but the fire is really what's causing the insulin resistance, which is the saturated fats and things like that. And so that's how I tell patients, it's like, let's stop fanning the smoke. Let's actually focus on what's causing the fire, and then the smoke will take care of itself.
That's an excellent analogy, and I'm glad you touched on the topic of people living with type 1 diabetes not being taught about insulin sensitivity. So that's obviously a big thing that we're all about here at Mastering Diabetes.
Yes, absolutely.
So last question I have for you here is, if somebody is just starting to adopt a low-fat, plant-based, whole food lifestyle, they may run into some obstacles. What do you see as the most common or most challenging obstacle, and how do you help people overcome that?
I think that's a really good one. I think people get really excited. So when I first start talking to people, I sell them on the idea of hope, right? So there's hope that you can get better. There's hope that you can have less medications, and there's hope that you can be on a different trajectory for your life, right? That gets really exciting. It's kind of like those, ooh, I'm so excited, and you're ready to do something, and then you start it, and then the flares go down. I think the motivation kind of dwindles if someone doesn't stay connected to that original purpose. The other obstacle is social, right? So it's family. So let's say you go home and your partner or spouse does not want to, or your children. So this is how I see it with kids as a parent. And mine were 13, 15, and 18 when I switched over the diet. I was like, listen, I started medical school. They were 5, 3, and 10 months. I was never a short order cook. I'm not going to start now. You'll either eat what I give you or you won't eat. You'll eat tomorrow because you'll be hungry. This is really simple. It might be a little, parents are like, I could never do that. I've had parents tell me, I can't feed my kids what I'm eating because they only like, McDonald's French fries and chicken nuggets. I'm like, the reason they like it is because you give it to them. And so for children, it's an easy thing for me. It's like, you're the parent, you feed them. And then they're teenagers, if they're bringing food home, you just say, this is the rule, you don't bring it into the house. So when we'd go out to eat, they would eat what they want. In the house, this is what we're eating. Older children, younger children, it doesn't matter. And if you start getting the kids involved, like I said, check out the 57 tips to get kids to eat more vegetables. There's a lot of information on the healthyhumanrevolution.com website about that. But it's really about getting the kids involved in what they're eating, participating in cooking, that type of thing. The other thing is this spouse. That's a whole nother story. I was truly lucky because my husband's like, I don't care. I like all food. So that can be an issue because there may be their own food addictions. They may be feeling like you're judging them because you're like, what do you mean that my food is not good anymore? Or you're telling me I'm bad because I'm eating this food? That's a lot of what occurs. They're afraid of your changing. So when you bring it in, I think you have to bring it in. You have to depend on your relationship. But when you bring this home saying, this is where I can go, I'm so excited. I might be able to, reverse my diabetes. I might be able to get off blood pressure meds. I'm hoping to lose weight. And you keep it focused on yourself. They don't even mention that they have to change or eat this way. What's going to happen over time, at least the majority of cases that I've seen, if you don't argue with the spouse, if you don't, shove it down their throat where they build up the wall because you're trying to tell them what to do, is they get curious. And this is what happens. And then they start going, well, what are you cooking over there? That looks kind of good. Can I have a bite? That's what happens. And then before you know it, that food is not being eaten that they made for themselves. Or I say this, make your own food. If your spouse is still insisting, if you're doing the cooking, to make them eat or whatever, cook their little side dish, whatever, the healthiest way you can. But everything else should be all plant-based. But those are just some few quick ones. But a lot of it is the spousal issue or going out with family and friends or the holidays. All those questions you get, oh, where's my protein? Where's that? Again, a lot of that information can be found anywhere, but we have a lot of it localized at our site.
These are fantastic tips. Thank you so, so much for joining us today, Dr. Marbas. You are a wealth of knowledge, such an amazing example of healthy living. Actually, you turned 50. Like, I can't believe it.
I'm not 50 yet, but it's coming very rapidly. How about that? Next year,
you're just such a great example. And I know you work tirelessly to help your patients and spread this information. So thank you very much for your efforts. We're going to link up all your resources so people can learn and digest that information. And again, we really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I tell you, you have no idea how many patients I send to your site. They're like, oh, your diabetes. I have like 15 seconds left. You need to go check out masteringdiabetes.org.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We're going to keep sending as many people as we can to you.
That's great. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.